is sublimated shoelaces. And these are super fun because you can make them totally custom. They make great gifts, and you can probably make this with stuff you already have in your craft room, even if you're just getting started with sublimation. Most shoelaces are already 100% polyester, so you don't have to look for special sublimation shoelaces. Just make sure that they are made out of polyester, and like I said, most of them are. So you could probably even pull shoelaces out of a current or old set of shoes and experiment with that. So if you have Infusible ink sheets and an old shoelace, you can jump right in and follow along with this class. So we'll do the sublimation printer version first. I'll show you a great place to get some patterns to make your own printed designs, and then we'll do the Infusible ink version. As far as cutting tools, all you're going to need is a paper trimmer or some scissors. You don't need a Cricut or any other cutting machine for doing these shoelaces. So let's head over to the computer.
So using digital paper is a really fun way to find patterns that you can use to print and use in sublimation projects. So we're going to go to Creative Fabrica, and if you just search for digital paper and scroll down, you're going to see a whole bunch of different collections. Some are kind of cartoony, some are floral, and you can refine your search a little more too. So let's say we go look for dinosaur digital paper, and we're going to see here's all these dinosaur themed digital papers or digital patterns. Sometimes it might just be called a digital background. But one thing to keep in mind is you've kind of got easy, medium, and hard types of patterns to work with. So something that's going to be an easy pattern is going to have a lot of white space in it. And if it's medium difficulty, then maybe just a little bit of white space. And then the harder ones to work with are a totally solid color print. So when you found a set that you like, go ahead and look through the patterns. Something else to keep in mind is a smaller pattern is going to work better just because you have such a small area to work with on the shoelace. And so really large images or patterns are not going to show up as well. Okay, so this one with an orange background and the smaller dinosaurs is going to work pretty good. So when you found one or two that you like, go ahead and download them. If you've got a subscription for Creative Fabrica, then you can just download right away. Otherwise, you can purchase it, or you can look for some other free digital papers somewhere else. Most likely it's going to download as a zipped folder, and so you'll need to unzip or extract everything in there. And then what you're going to do is open up the template for Canva. Upload any patterns that you want to print out for your sublimation shoelaces. So for this one here, it's kind of like these little rainbow flowers, and you can see the pattern itself comes in pretty big. And so I'm just going to take that image and make it really small and shrink it down on this page, and then duplicate it several times over. And then what I have is nearly this whole page of an image that the pattern is much smaller than the original because I shrunk it down. And so a few of these flowers will fit across the shoelace instead of maybe just one. Okay, then up here in the template portion, I'm going to take these orange dinosaurs and drag it over to this first image here. And then I'm also going to do one in the shorter image. And so what happens is you can see that when I take it into the smaller frame, more of the dinosaurs show up. And that's what I want. I want a few dinosaurs kind of crammed into this little space. So I'm going to put one in there, and then I'm going to line up the pattern. So see this little green dinosaur? When I paste in another one, I want to make sure that his head is lined up. That way I'll get kind of this continuous pattern as I press on the shoelaces. And then for your reference, each of these strips is about 1.5 inches wide. So that gives you a good size for just pressing one side of the shoelace or folding it over and pressing both sides at once, and we'll go through both of those through the class. Okay, so with my orange strip ready, I'm going to duplicate that a few more times on the page. And then what I'm going to do here is just select everything, click on position, and then click tidy up, and it'll kind of even out all the spacing so that it fills up my page. Then the last thing I'm going to do here in Canva, add one more page, and I'm going to type out my name a few times so that I can put my name on some shoelaces. So just add in any text, type the name, change it to a font that you want, and then most shoelaces are going to be about 5/16 of an inch wide. And so just make sure that your spacing of your word or name or whatever is going to fit that. Then you can change the color, change the font some more if you want. And then the way that I did this was make 4 different colors and then duplicate those and rotate them so that they were going down the long side of the page, and filled in the page by duplicating everything several times. Once you have the pages ready how you want them to print, then we're going to click share and download. You can download them one image at a time, or you can download them all at once, and it will just be put into a zipped folder that you need to extract after it's on your computer. Next, open up the program that you like to print your sublimation prints from. I often like to print from Illustrator, but I know not everybody has that, so I'm going to show you just printing from Google Docs. So you can open up a new Google Doc, and you're going to insert each of the images that you want to print. So this is going to be my orange dinosaur pattern, my little rainbow flowers on a white background, and my names. Then to maximize everything, I'm going to drag out the margins on the side and the top and the bottom, and then drag the corner of the picture so that it can fill up the page as much as possible. Repeat with the other pages, and then go to print to your sublimation printer. If you are new to sublimation printing, make sure you watch one of the other classes about getting your sublimation printer set up. I have my printer set up already, and I have some saved settings so that it's automatically going to print at the best quality. It's automatically going to mirror my images for me. So just be aware that those kinds of things that you need to think about as you're printing. Okay, so here I have my Epson converted printer selected, and I know that everything else is already set up the right way, so I will just hit print. So I've got sublimation paper in my printer. So each of those is going to print. It takes quite a while because it goes slow and it's laying down a lot of ink. So now's a good time to warm up your Easy Press and start flattening out all of the shoelaces. They often come with some little wrinkles or twists in them, and you want to flatten that out before you start pressing a pattern on them. So my press is heated up to 390 right here. Really, I only needed it at 380 for the 2 different types of presses that I'm going to do. I'm going to use 380 and 360, but you can see I just press it down for a few seconds and then do the next section so that you don't get any funny lines when you're pressing on your pattern. Okay, now what I recommend is having a test shoelace to start with. So yes, while it's a good idea to always have like some scrap polyester fabric to test the quality of your prints, test if the colors are coming out the way you expect, but it's also a good idea to have a shoelace to practice on as well, because we're going to try a couple of different things here. Okay, so you're going to lay a piece of butcher paper or even laser printer paper down on your Easy Press mat. This little plasticky part up here is called the aglet. I learned that from watching Phineas and Ferb with my kids when they were little. So take a little bit of heat-resistant tape and tape down one end of the shoelace, and then tape down a lower section of the shoelace too, so that the whole thing is stable. So here I'm just doing a test on pressing one side of the shoelace. So I've taped down a little piece of my printed sublimation paper, just lay another piece of paper over the top of that. I have my heat press set at 380 for 35 seconds. This is what has worked best with my Easy Press, the sublimation printer and ink and paper that I'm using. So it's a good place for you to start. And then if you feel like you need to adjust that at all, then go ahead. When the timer is done, remove the Easy Press and then use your gloves or let it cool. Then you're going to remove the printed sublimation paper and the tape, and you're going to check out your shoelace underneath. All right, so that's really nice. The orange is super vibrant. The other dinosaurs look really cool. All right, so most of the time, pressing just one side of the shoelace is going to be fine. But if you want to do both sides, here's how you can do that. And you are going to want to do a little bit of testing first. So take your printed strip and fold it in half. And you're going to kind of sandwich the shoelace in between. If you have a repeating pattern like this, especially with a solid background, make sure it's lined up well at the top. And then tape it in a couple of places as it goes down so that nothing moves. Cover everything with more butcher paper and press at 380 for 30 seconds. To get the best results, I found I needed to press from the top for 30 seconds and then flip everything over and press from the backside for 20 seconds. The backside of the shoelace needed that direct pressure, and it could be that it's because I'm using just an Easy Press and an Easy Press mat here. If you're using a different kind of heat press, you might get enough pressure that you don't need to do the flipping part of the process. See here on the right, that didn't get pressed from the back, and then on the left it did, and so you get that really bright orange on the double press. Okay, so now that I've got a good idea of my times and how to position things, I'm going to work on my name shoelace. So just using my paper trimmer, I'm going to cut all the names into strips. And then as we go through this one, I'll show you a couple of tips for things that, as I did each section of the shoelace, I kind of learned something new. And so this will be able to help you out if you're doing names, words or something like that across your shoelace. All right, so first step, lay down a piece of butcher paper on top of your mat. Take a shoelace that you've already pressed so that there's no wrinkles and tape it down at the top. So I took some scissors and just trimmed pretty close to the names on each end. And on this very first one, I kind of just tried to eyeball it. I felt like, I can see the ink a little bit through the backside, and so I think it's good. And so I just started taping the sublimation paper down on top of the shoelace. Next strip down, I did the same thing, trimmed the ends, and since I know there's white space between each name, then it doesn't really need to be super precise here. Again, make sure that you're taping regularly so that nothing shifts while you're pressing or lifting up the heat press later. So then I just took the side of the butcher paper and folded over the top so that now it's protected from both sides. I have my heat press again set at 380 for 35 seconds. And then I just moved it down to do the next section. You could use a larger easy press for this if you wanted to. Just make sure that you're doing nice even pressure across the whole press. All right, then it was time to take apart this section. Sometimes you can save the heat tape and use it again another time. Sometimes it sticks to the paper and it's just kind of a one-time use. Okay, so pulling this up to take a look at it, you can see I did pretty good with getting the names on there, but they could be centered a little bit better. Like they're a little bit high on the shoelace here. So here's what I did for the next section to try and help that a little bit. Position the butcher paper, tape down the top of the shoelace, and get another strip of names ready. So I trimmed close to the names, and then I also cut in kind of at an angle so that I could see where the first letter of the name and then where the name was ending, like on both ends of the paper. And that helped me kind of center that up on the shoelace a little bit better. I think one thing that I would try next time would be to draw a straight line on the back of the sublimation paper. Like lay it down on a light pad or up against a window so that I could draw a line just through the center of all the words. And then if I line that up with the center of the shoelace, then my names should be lined up correctly. So I feel like there's a few different ways to kind of help get that centered on there. And maybe you can play a little bit with what works best for you. But there's my suggestion, is try and draw a line on the back side so that you're lining that up with the shoelace instead of these little notch marks. And then you'll just continue this process until you get down to the other end of the shoelace. Okay, so for doing the little flower pattern, I'm going to show you a way that you can kind of speed up the whole process a little bit. And that's going to be basically pressing 2 at once. So the biggest thing here is you want to make sure that you have folded the shoelace in half and that the same side is facing up all the way around. Then tape down the ends of the shoelace, tape a top section. So then take your paper trimmer and cut some 1.5-inch strips of this flower pattern. Now I didn't do this here on the first strip, but you'll notice in some of the other ones, I do a little bit of a wavy cut to cut off any partial flowers so that the end is just a whole flower, and that makes lining up the next pieces much easier because you're not trying to exactly line up an overlapping pattern. All right, so I taped this twice, once down by the aglets and then once higher up. And then you'll either fold over some of that butcher paper or put another piece of paper on top and press at 380 for 35 seconds. We're going to pull everything down and do another double press. So you're just saving yourself a little bit of time by doing 2 sections at a time instead of just 1 section at a time. So you'll line up the shoelaces so that the printed parts are matching, and then you'll tape those down so they don't move. And then you'll tape over another strip of the sublimation print and press that down. So the total length of your shoelace will determine how many times you can do this process before you get to the little middle section where the shoelace was folded, and we're going to do that by itself. So find the last little spot that doesn't have a pattern on it yet, lay it down, and cut out a piece of the sublimation print that will fill that space. And one thing that's kind of nice to remember is this is going to be the very middle of the shoelace that's going to be down inside the shoe, and it's not ever going to be seen. You can see here where I'm doing a wiggle cut to get rid of any of those little flowers that have been sliced in half. Then cover everything with butcher paper, including anything that has already been pressed, because you don't want that to transfer onto your Easy Press. All right, for the last method, I'm going to show you how you can do this with Cricut Infusible ink sheets. So if you have a pattern that you love, or you don't have a sublimation printer yet and you still want to try out this project, this is a great way to go. So you're going to take your sheet and cut it into 1.5-inch strips if you're doing double-sided. If you're doing single-sided, you could do just a 1-inch strip. Having 1.5 is a little easier to work with. Okay, so after you have your strip cut, you are going to peel the little plastic backing off. We don't need that, and it makes the ink sheet easier to work with. So just peel that whole thing away, and then you're going to take your paper strip and fold it in half. If you were just going to press one side of a shoelace, you wouldn't need to fold it. All right, so then some of this is going to look really familiar. Lay down a piece of butcher paper, tape down the top of your shoelace, slide the shoelace into the folded infusible ink sheet, tape everything so that it's not going to move. So for the infusible ink sheets, I found that the best temperature for me was 360. And then since I'm doing double-sided, I'm going to press for 30 seconds from the top, then flip it and do 20 seconds from the other side. Okay, to do the next section, cut another strip of the infusible ink sheet. And you might be able to tell here, this particular leopard print has kind of a lightly shaded background, and then it goes dark, and then it kind of goes light. I cut it so that I would have light at the top, dark in the middle, and then light at the bottom again, so that the pattern of the whole shoelace could stay light, dark, light, dark. And when I added this second strip, I overlapped it just a little bit, and I'll show you that with this pattern, it works just fine. I made sure that I didn't have a little white strip peeking through in the shoelace when I was done. So let's take a look here where that seam was. So it was the bottom of one and top of another, so they're both kind of the light background, and you can see that overlap is almost imperceptible. And then this is how everything looks up right at the ends. You can get that paper or pattern really pretty close. I just tried to not press on the plastic part. I didn't want to risk it melting.
I'm sure you've been able to brainstorm some really great gift ideas that you could do with shoelaces. A kid that's obsessed with a certain character or animal, making shoelaces for somebody with their name on it when maybe it's hard for them to find a keychain that has their name spelled correctly. And then you've got other things like kids' sports teams or matching shoelaces for the bride and groom to use in their comfy dancing sneakers. Now, I will say, if you are doing something where you want a large quantity of shoelaces, let's say you're making shoelaces for a whole sports tournament or an event or something where you're going to need 50 or more of these matching shoelaces, your best bet is going to be to find someplace online that can print you a bulk order of custom shoelaces. Doing that many will take a long time, but if you're just doing a handful or like a one-off custom pair, then this is a really fun way to go. Thanks again for hanging out while we do these sublimation shoelaces, and I will see you around the internet. Bye.